Cream paper, gold embossing, and my father's handwriting in perfect, rigid strokes. Even before I opened it, I knew what it meant. Robert Edwards never sent letters unless they were meant to make a statement. I turned it over in my hands as sunlight spilled across my office desk, the same desk where I'd signed a multi-million-dollar contract 2 days earlier. My assistant was still outside, fielding calls from investors, but for a moment, the noise of the world dimmed. All I could hear was the whisper of old expectations pressing against new achievements. I broke the seal. Robert Edwards requests the honor of your presence at his retirement celebration, the Peninsula Grand Ballroom, Saturday, 7 p.m. Black tie. No warmth. No dear Isabella. No love, Dad. Just instructions. I leaned back, staring at the skyline beyond my glass walls, the city I'd built my life in, the empire I'd created from nothing but vision and grit. 200 employees worked under my leadership. Our AI technology had just been called industry-defining by TechCrunch. And yet, a single invitation from my father had the power to send that old knot twisting in my stomach again. It wasn't fear. Not anymore. Just history. When your father is a man who measures worth in family photos and last names, no achievement feels quite enough. To him, success meant legacy, a son to inherit the empire, a daughter to host charity galas and bear heirs. I had chosen neither. My phone buzzed. Mom, he's planning something special. Please come. Special. That word carried weight in our family, usually the kind that broke bones, not hearts. I typed a polite response, of course, I'll be there, then closed my eyes. For years, I'd told myself I didn't need his approval. I'd built a company, a life, a name. But deep down, some quiet corner of me still wanted to walk into that ballroom and see pride in his eyes instead of disappointment. That was my first mistake. Saturday arrived cloaked in gold and glass. The peninsula's marble lobby shimmered beneath chandeliers, every inch whispering power and old money. I stepped through the revolving doors in a midnight gown, simple, elegant, the kind that announced confidence without begging for attention. Miss Edwards. The hostess smiled too brightly. You're seated at the head table. Of course I was. Front and center, where every glance would find me. My father never left things to chance. Inside, the ballroom looked like a corporate cathedral, chandeliers glittering like crowns, a string quartet playing Bach as servers glided between tables of billionaires and CEOs. Every detail screamed Robert Edwards, precise, commanding, immaculate. And there he was, across the room. My father. Silver hair perfectly parted, tuxedo tailored to military precision, laughing with men who owed him fortunes. The room seemed to orbit him, the king at his final coronation. He saw me before I could decide whether to wave. His eyes flickered, not warmth, not welcome. Assessment. The same gaze that once scanned balance sheets now weighed me in silence. Isabella. My mother's voice cut through the hum. She swept in, pearls trembling at her throat. You look lovely, darling. Her smile was too tight. Just be patient tonight. What's he planning? I asked softly. She hesitated, glancing toward the stage where a single microphone stood beneath a banner reading, "A Legacy of Leadership." Just remember who you are, she whispered. I almost laughed. I know exactly who I am. But as the lights dimmed and applause filled the room, I felt that familiar ache, the one that comes when the child you once were braces for the parent they can never please. The string quartet faded. My father stepped to the podium, commanding silence with a single glance. Good evening, he began, voice smooth as glass. Tonight, we honor not just a career, but a legacy. Applause. Cameras. Pride glowing like firelight. I sat straight, my hands clasped tight in my lap. The applause still echoed as servers began pouring champagne. My father stood at the podium, recounting 4 decades of triumphs, mergers, expansions, a company forged from grit and vision. Each sentence was polished like marble, every pause deliberate, every smile calculated. He didn't mention family, not yet. That part always came later. I watched from the head table, hands folded neatly, expression composed. It was the same mask I'd worn in boardrooms, the one that hid the tremor beneath confidence. Beside me, Marcus was already on his second drink. My younger brother, the golden heir, had inherited our father's charm, but none of his discipline. 2 divorces, 1 failing division, and a lifetime of excuses. Yet to Robert Edwards, he was still the future. Nice turnout, Marcus muttered, swirling his glass. You might actually get some decent LinkedIn photos out of this. Always thinking of my PR, I replied coolly. He smirked, leaning closer. Dad's got a surprise planned. You'll want to pay attention. I turned to him. What kind of surprise? He only shrugged, a satisfied gleam in his eyes. Let's just say the family business is moving in a new direction. A chill crept down my spine. I wanted to ask more, but my father's voice boomed across the ballroom, commanding attention. When I started Edwards Industries, I dreamed of building something that would outlast me, a legacy carried forward by those who share my values. I caught my mother's eyes from across the table. She looked down quickly, her fingers twisting her napkin. That was all the confirmation I needed. He was going to make an announcement, one that had nothing to do with me. As the evening unfolded, conversations floated like perfume, compliments wrapped around comparisons. She's still not married? Such a shame, with all that education. Marcus is lucky to have his father's support. Their words pricked like pins, familiar and dull. I'd learned to nod politely, to let their judgments slide across my armor. But tonight, every whisper seemed louder, sharper, as if the walls themselves were conspiring to echo them back. I reached for my champagne and forced a smile. I had negotiated with billionaires. I'd faced down hostile investors. I could survive a dinner. Still, something about this night felt different, heavier. When dessert was served, my father rose once more, tapping his glass. The room hushed instantly. Before we closed the evening, he said, I'd like to speak about legacy, not in terms of wealth, but of values. His eyes swept the crowd, landing finally on me. My heart thudded once, hard. In life, success is meaningless without succession. Without family who carry the torch forward. There it was. I have 2 children, he continued. One who understands the meaning of legacy and one who has lost her way. A ripple of uneasy laughter spread through the tables. My throat tightened, but I didn't move. Some pursue careers so fiercely, they forget what truly matters. Family. Continuity. Purpose beyond profit. Each word struck like a gavel, sentencing me in the court of public opinion. Marcus sat straighter, pretending surprise he didn't feel. My mother's eyes glistened. And me? I kept my face calm, my pulse steady, even as humiliation pooled cold in my stomach. He wasn't done. Not yet. Tonight, my father said, voice swelling, I'm proud to announce the next chapter of Edwards Industries. The room leaned in. My breath caught. Marcus Edwards, he declared, lifting his glass, will take over as CEO when I retire next month. Applause broke like thunder, polite, practiced, hollow. My chest burned. I felt the room closing in, 200 faces watching for a reaction. But I didn't move. Not yet. Because deep down, something shifted, not despair, not anger. My father's toast hung in the air, golden and poisonous. Marcus, the future of Edwards Industries. The words echoed like a verdict, final and cruel. Glasses clinked. Smiles flickered. Guests murmured approval. And yet, beneath the applause, a current of unease rippled through the room. Everyone could feel the imbalance, the theater of it all. I sat perfectly still, back straight, face unreadable. Inside, a storm gathered. I'd built something real, a company with global clients, groundbreaking technology, a team that trusted me. But none of it mattered here. In this gilded ballroom, legacy was still measured in sons and surnames, not vision. My father turned toward me, his voice cutting through the noise. And to my daughter, Isabella, he said with a thin smile, perhaps one day you'll learn that a life without family is no life at all. Laughter, quiet, uncomfortable, rippled around the table. The sting was sharp, deliberate. I caught my mother's eyes. She looked as though she might cry. Across the room, a man rose slowly from his seat, William Morrison, chairman of the board, my father's most powerful investor. His expression was unreadable, but his gaze lingered on me. I knew Morrison's reputation: precise, calculating, ruthless when necessary. He'd once told me at a conference, "Power isn't given, Isabella. It's claimed." And in that moment, as my father's voice droned on about legacy and lineage, I understood. This was never about approval. It was about control. And control could be taken back. My phone buzzed softly beneath the table. "Morrison, stay composed. The truth has a way of surfacing." I lifted my eyes, meeting his across the room. A silent understanding passed between us. Then I stood. The chatter died instantly. Even the string quartet faltered. 200 eyes turned toward me, the daughter, the disappointment, now breaking script. "Congratulations, Marcus," I said evenly. My voice carried through the hall, calm and clear. "It seems father has made his wishes known." My father's smile tightened. "Sit down, Isabella." But I didn't. I looked out over the crowd, the investors, the CEOs, the cameras discreetly raised by eager hands. For years I believed success meant earning approval. Tonight, I realize it means standing tall even when it's denied. A murmur rippled through the room. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. My father's eyes hardened. I set my glass down, steady and deliberate. "So here's to legacy," I said. "The kind you build, not the kind you're handed." And then I turned and walked away. Each step across the marble floor echoed like a drumbeat. I didn't rush. I didn't hide. I walked out with my head high, dignity intact. Behind me, the whispers erupted. Cameras flashed. The performance had cracked, and the story was no longer his to control. In the lobby, beneath the shimmer of crystal lights, Morrison was waiting. "Miss Edwards," he said, voice low but firm. "I think it's time your father and the world learned who truly built the future." The marble lobby shimmered beneath the chandeliers, but my pulse drowned out everything. Morrison stood waiting, posture composed, eyes sharp, the kind of calm that comes before a storm. "Miss Edwards," he greeted formally, loud enough for nearby guests to notice. "We need to speak. Now." My breath hitched. "About what?" He offered a faint smile. "About truth. And timing." Behind us, the ballroom doors opened. Laughter spilled out brittle, false. My father was still at the podium, no doubt reclaiming control of his carefully choreographed evening. But Morrison's presence, his tone, told me that control was slipping fast. He stepped closer, voice low. "You closed the acquisition deal yesterday?" "Yes." "The Morrison Group finalized the purchase." He nodded, eyes gleaming. "Then tonight is the perfect moment." I froze. Moment for what? "To show the room exactly who you are." For years, I'd built my identity in quiet boardrooms, through contracts and innovation, not confrontation. But tonight had stripped every layer of silence away. Morrison turned toward the ballroom. "You have the facts. I have the leverage. Together, we shift the narrative." Something inside me trembled, not with fear, but with power long suppressed. I'd spent my life believing dignity meant staying silent, absorbing blows with grace. But perhaps true dignity was using truth as a blade, not a shield. The doors opened wider. My father's voice carried across the lobby, still preaching legacy. Guests leaned in, unaware of the tremor about to hit. Morrison's assistant appeared beside him, clutching a leather portfolio. Inside, I glimpsed the signed contract, $50 million, global headlines waiting to break. "Isabella," Morrison said softly, "are you ready to let them see the daughter they dismissed?" My throat tightened. "He's my father." "And you," Morrison replied, "are his equal, perhaps his better. You can save his company from his own blindness. But first, you must stop apologizing for your brilliance." The words landed like truth I'd buried too long. I turned back toward the ballroom, the light, the faces, the stage that had once been his domain. The humiliation still burned, but underneath it pulsed something stronger, resolve. I wasn't walking back to seek validation. I was walking back to claim recognition. As Morrison held the door, whispers rippled through the crowd, the prodigal daughter returning. My father's face paled as I stepped forward beside his investor. "Robert," Morrison said evenly, voice carrying across the hall, "before you finalize your succession announcement, there's a development you need to address." My father blinked, confusion flickering. William, this is a family matter. The ballroom froze the instant Morrison's voice cut through the applause. Before we move forward, there's news every person in this room deserves to hear, he said, stepping beside my father at the podium. It concerns the future of Edwards Industries. My father stiffened, fingers gripping the edge of the lectern. William, this isn't the time. It's precisely the time, Morrison interrupted, his tone like polished steel. You've spoken of legacy. Let's show them what it truly looks like. He turned to the crowd. Yesterday, Isabella Edwards finalized a $50 million acquisition with Morrison Group. Her company, Edwards AI, will now lead our innovation division globally. A stunned silence swallowed the room. Forks halted midair. Cameras clicked. Morrison's assistant lifted a tablet. The ballroom's massive screens flickered to life, displaying the signed contract. Morrison Group acquires Edwards AI. Strategic partnership announced. Gasps rippled through the audience. Someone whispered, 50 million? Another, she built that. My father's face drained of color. He glanced at the screen, then at me as if seeing a stranger. Morrison wasn't done. Her technology has already been adopted by 7 Fortune 500 companies. Her valuation exceeds the entire profits of Edwards Industries' regional divisions combined. The whispers turned into a hum of awe. Morrison folded his hands. You called her a disappointment, Robert. I call her the future. The words cracked through the air like thunder. I stepped forward, voice steady though my heart raced. All I ever wanted was to be seen for who I am, not for what I lacked. My gaze locked on my father's. His eyes were glassy, searching. You taught me to fight for everything, I said. I just didn't realize I'd have to fight you too. For a moment, he said nothing, pride and shame warring behind his silence. Morrison faced the board members seated across the front rows. Per governance terms, strategic decisions, including succession, require major stakeholder approval. That includes Ms. Edwards, now a strategic advisor with veto authority. The board murmured in agreement. My father's voice cracked. You planned this. No, I replied gently. I prepared for it. The room seemed to inhale as he stood there, the titan undone, the patriarch stripped of certainty. I extended my hand, not in defiance, but declaration. This isn't revenge. It's realignment. He stared at my hand for a long moment, then, slowly, placed his trembling one into mine. Applause began softly at first, then built like a wave, not for him, not for me, but for the truth finally laid bare. In that sound, years of silence broke. I turned to the crowd. Legacy isn't inherited, I said quietly. It's earned. The lights glinted off the contract behind me, proof, power, promise. The ballroom's applause still echoed long after the screens faded to black. My father stood beside me, smaller somehow, not in stature, but in certainty. For decades, he had defined success as inheritance, as control. Tonight, the truth had rewritten that story in front of 200 witnesses. When the crowd finally dispersed, I walked through the marble corridor alone. Outside, the city lights shimmered across the glass, reflections of everything I'd built on my own terms. My phone vibrated endlessly with messages from journalists, investors, and strangers calling me brave. But the only voice I wanted to hear was silent. I found him in the empty ballroom, staring at the darkened screens. He didn't turn when I entered. You embarrassed me, he said quietly. I stopped beside him. No. I revealed the truth. He exhaled, heavy and hollow. I wanted to leave something behind. You did, I said softly. But legacy isn't just what you pass down. It's what you allow to grow beside you. He looked at me then, not as a father watching a daughter, but as a man seeing an equal. You really built all this? Every line of code, every deal, every sleepless night, I answered. And I did it not to prove you wrong, but to prove I was enough. Silence stretched between us, fragile but real. There were no apologies, no sudden reconciliation. Just understanding, imperfect, but honest. We parted with a handshake, professional and boundaried, yet somehow kinder than any hug we'd ever shared. In the weeks that followed, the headlines didn't fade, they evolved. The daughter who redefined legacy. The CEO who walked away with dignity. My company soared, our partnerships multiplying. Inside boardrooms, my voice carried weight that no last name could grant, only earned respect. My father kept his distance, though I'd sometimes catch him watching my interviews, eyes softening in the glow of a screen he didn't know I could see. Marcus adjusted too, stripped of favoritism. He began to work, to learn. And slowly, our professional conversations turned into something resembling sibling trust. But the greatest change was quiet within me. I stopped chasing approval that was never mine to win. I began celebrating victories without waiting for someone else to name them worthy. One evening, months later, I stood on my balcony, city lights stretching like constellations. I thought of the little girl who once sat at her father's desk, dreaming of being good enough.